When troubles come and my heart burden be, then I am still and wait here in the silence until you come and sit while with me. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be.
Praise and thank you for the innumerable blessings you have given us. Thank you for giving us a mind with strength and a heart with love. Thank you for supporting to continue our life amidst the pandemic had resulted a lot of changes in our lives. We are sorry whenever we feel we are left out. Father, help us stay focused in our life. When situations becomes challenging, grant us the gift of courage and enthusiasm. Grant us the grace to use our knowledge for the good of us and others. All these we pray in your mighty name. Amen. Pledge. India is my country. All Indians are my brothers and sisters. I love my country and I am proud of its rich and varied heritage. I shall always try to be worthy of it. I shall give respect to my parents, teachers, and all elders and treat everyone with courtesy. To my country and my people, I pledge my devotion. In their well being and prosperity alone lies my happiness. Jai Hind.
Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Thank you. So, as we all know, the word curriculum actually originated from the Latin word curare. Hence, curriculum means a course to be run for reaching a goal. And also, the Cunningham, he actually defined curriculum as it is a tool in the hands of an artist to mold his material according to his ideal objective in his studio. So here, he actually meant who the artist, the teacher is the artist, and the pupil is the material. Also, the studio is referred to the school, and the material is highly self-active and responds consciously. Also, in the present context, it is actually the sum total of all the experiences the pupil receive through the manifold activities that go in the school. In schools, there are various activities, both curricular and in co-curricular activities. So, in effect to all these activities, the child is getting a certain experience. So, the curriculum is actually meant to be that sum total of all the experiences received by the pupil. Also, there is numerous interactions between the teacher and the pupils. So we'll move on to my topic. It is types of curriculum. There are various types of curriculum, and we'll look one on that. The first one is subject-centered, activity-centered curriculum, teacher-centered curriculum, learner-centered curriculum, integrated curriculum, core curriculum, board feed curriculum, and hidden curriculum. So we'll look on to the first curriculum. It is subject-centered curriculum. As the name suggests, it is based on the subject and the subject is given more importance. So it is actually the basis for instruction that focuses on the courses being taught. The prime importance is given to the courses that are being taught and each one separately from the other. As we all know, there are various courses that is being handled in the school and one subject is being different from the other. Also, it is a traditional method, as we all know, because we have seen a lot more curriculum after subject-centered curriculum, and it mainly stresses on the student's mastery of a prescribed amount of material. They are actually looking on to the mastery of the student if for actually the prescribed amount of material. Actually, if we are taking into a subject into consideration, if biology is being taken, then the topics in the biology are the student must show a mastery. Actually, he must learn and just do the evaluation, and during the evaluation, he must give his best so that he can show that he has become a master in that subject. Also, it is a teacher focused as the subject is being delivered by the teacher. Instruction is being done by with the use of textbooks, and the test evaluates the student learning. The material is actually primarily on facts rather than on investigation. There is no point of investigation as material is being given, only the factual materials are being given, and so that it lost its popularity in the late 20th and earlier 21st centuries. When we are looking, this is actually a subject-centered curriculum design. So we'll take each subject into consideration. That is, if we are taking any subject, if it is physics or chemistry or anything, the subject to be taught is being taken into consideration. Then we'll think about the definitions of important generalization and understandings to be taught. Topic areas are decided, and intellectual discipline is being identified. After all these three processes, we'll determine the objectives. Then, deciding upon the learning experience related to the mastering the content, they'll be thinking what learning experience must be provided to each student. After that, these experiences are being organized. Then, this are being evaluated. How much the mastery is being extended, or of the the evaluation is done to the extent of the mastery what each student has been got. So this is about student subject-centered curriculum. When we look on to the next curriculum, it is activity-centered curriculum. It is actually the modern approach which is against traditional curriculum. As we have learned, the traditional curriculum, it is subject-centered curriculum. So it is actually a modern approach, this activity-centered. Also, it is a student-centered. And the subject matter it is actually presented through, as we have learned from the title, it is presented through the activity itself, as it is the medium of imparting knowledge, teaching skill, and developing attitudes. So the curriculum developers have thought that this activity will be able to impart knowledge, also teaching skills, and in developing the attitudes in children. Its importance is that balanced development of a child is balanced development in a child is seen. Development of social virtues, which is very important nowadays. Motivation is got for the child because it is activity centered and he is doing everything what is being taught in the class. And pupils develop initiative as they are doing their work by their own. It is actually preparation for life. We all know that when we start doing something, we'll be getting initiated, and they'll be doing in accordance with the. Also, they'll be doing in their future life. Even if I think if a child is being taught to create a electric circuit, we don't know whether what he is going to do in the future, because he can actually make it into another development or discovery itself. So it's actually a preparation for life itself. And cooperation is being developed as during the activity centered curriculum, the students will be cooperating with each other so that they can do further things. And before that, in the activity centered curriculum, child centered education and activity movement actually led to the concept of activity centered curriculum. And we know that learning by doing is being stressed in this curriculum. Students also get inspired to apply their creative ideas, knowledge, and mind in solving problems. So these are the facts involved with the activity-centered curriculum. And when we move on to teacher-centered curriculum, as we all know from the title itself, teacher-centered curriculum, teacher is being given the all the focuses. So students put all their focus on the teacher as teacher talks and student listens carefully. It is actually based on the traditional pedagogy where knowledge is passed from teacher to student. Also, it is suggested that teachers may participate in any combination of curricular decision making in the school level, like a teacher can be implementer, adapter, developer, and a researcher when it comes to the curriculum decision making. So we'll look what each role is. That is, when a teacher is an implementer, in this role, the teacher has a minimum responsibility or the involvement in the curriculum development phase of the curriculum fair process, though he has a significant role in application phase. He's actually having a role in application phase only. The implementation phase, he is not having that much role. And when we are thinking about the adapter, a teacher can be adapter because teacher's role is just the same as an implementer, as the teacher becomes ready to accept the curriculum in order to implement it. Also, developer. When we are taking developer into consideration, the teacher take part in the curriculum development process, as she knows what are the learning experiences that must be provided to a child, or what are the things that we provide that being taught to a child. So it is easy for her to develop the curriculum in accordance with all the things, keeping that in her mind. Also, she must be a researcher. That is, only making is not everything. We must analyze and we must evaluate what is actually the outcome. So curriculum is actually a dynamic process. Keeping in view the characteristics, there is a need to conduct research in order to bring out desirable changes in the curriculum. So if we are only looking out the output, then only we can understand what all changes must be provided in certain things or in that curriculum. So these are the roles in which a teacher-centered curriculum a teacher must play in making a curriculum. So when we move on to we'll just see the advantages and disadvantages of teacher-centered curriculum. When we are looking at the advantages, it becomes actually easy to achieve the goals as it is designed by a teacher. The curriculum is actually designed by a teacher, so it will be helpful for her to actually achieve the goals. She is knowing what all must be done, when, how, and where. Also, the content is logically arranged and psychologically sound. Psychologically sound means at certain ages of time, she is knowing what must be taught at certain age, how it must be taught. So the contents are logically arranged and psychologically sound in accordance to the ages of the child. Irrelevant materials is avoided, democracy is encouraged, and cooperation is developed. And when we look on to the disadvantages, there is a hindrance due to rigid administration planning and management, because as it is already made, or the curriculum is already made, so she can't do any such flexibilities in that. It is difficult to maintain common standards in different institutions, as different institutions is run by different managements and different teachers, so it is actually a difficulty in maintaining common standards. Also, a drastic change in examination system must be is actually required. Then if it is a teacher-centered curriculum, we have all experienced a teacher-centered curriculum, because so that the student is not having any role, any significant role in that. So it may provide boredom to the students. There is no collaboration with other students as he works alone, because a child is working alone. He is actually doing his own assignments, he is actually doing his own projects alone. So he'll not be having a connection with other students, which actually reduces the communication ability of that child. So we have learned what teacher-centered curriculum is, and now we'll be looking on to what learner-centered curriculum is. Learner-centered curriculum, it is actually designed to emphasize individual development and their approaches. The curriculum emerges from needs, interest, and purpose of students. So as we all know, it is actually based on the learner's interest, their needs, and purpose of students. So the learner-centered curriculum, when we are looking onto it, it is actually flexible. It accepts new modification to conform to the needs, interest, and interest of the particular learners. In fact, also the curriculum plan is based on knowledge of learner needs and interests. So he's actually given a freedom to develop naturally because it is actually a learner-centered curriculum. Each learner is getting a freedom to learn at their own levels, or there's no forceful learning in that. Here, teacher is actually a guide and not a task manager. She guides his child with the things that happening around them, and scientific study of development of pupil is occurring there. Also, the interest is very important. The interest is the motive of all work. If a child is not having any interest in doing any work, then it is not actually successful. So he must have a prior interest in doing certain things that comes in his into his life. So for that, the teachers must inculcate certain amount of interest for to make the learner-centered curriculum effective. And when we move on to integrated curriculum, there is actually integration process taking place in this curriculum. It is actually, according to Roberts and Kellogg, the term integrated curriculum refers to a way of learning, planning, and organizing so the discrete disciplines of subject matter are integrated and match the development needs of the learner, help to meaningfully connect the students' learning to their current and past experience. So here they are saying that through integrated curriculum, the subject matter are integrated and matched in accordance to the developmental needs of a learner. We have already learned what developmental needs of a learner is. So the curriculum is actually planned and organized in accordance to the developmental needs of a learner, with keeping in mind the current and the keeping in mind the fact that the current and past experiences of a child must be considered for the easy inculcation of learning. And when we look on to the integrated curriculum, it is as follows. It is an actually approach to teaching and learning that is based on both philosophy and practicality. When philosophy is being brought into practical life, it is actually giving more life into it. So it is actually an approach to teaching and learning which is based on both philosophy and practicality. It is a curricular approach that purposefully draws together knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values from within and across subject areas to develop more powerful understanding of key ideas. So we can see that in this, as it is an integrated curriculum process. So here we can see the knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values are being drawn out purposefully. So these are the things which are drawn out purposefully with the within and across the subject areas. If you are taking into consideration of any subject, with the subject itself, the teacher can actually inculcate moral values from that. If you're taking chemistry into consideration, or if you're taking the plastic, for example, if I'm saying plastic into consideration, she can actually inculcate moral values through that, in not destroying the environment, to actually treat the plastic properly. So these are the things. If we are taking various subjects into consideration, a teacher can actually inculcate various skills and attitudes and knowledge and values in a child. Also, the components of the curriculum are connected and related in meaningful ways by both teachers and students. Both teacher and student is given importance in this curriculum. Also, essential skills are being developed with effect to the learning, which is very important. Skills must be provided in accordance to the learning so that a life can be put forward for a child in future. When we look on to the benefits of curriculum integration, it actually allows flexibility, building on prior knowledge and experience, unifying the students' learning, reflecting the real world, matching the way students think. If you're taking each point into consideration, it allows flexibility, means a teacher can plan the development of key skills and understanding that transcend individuals, transcend subject. Because the teacher is given actually the power to inculcate or to develop various skills and understandings in a child. So in teacher centered curriculum, there is actually hindrance in flexibility. So here there is no hindrance in flexibility. She can actually do whatever in accordance to the condition or the understanding level of a child. Building on prior knowledge and experience means, as we all know, it is actually meant by choosing meaningful connections among subject areas, which helps students build on their diverse prior knowledge. Actually, in accordance to the previous knowledge, we are actually checking our previous knowledge and then previous knowledge and experience, and then we are building on to that. From concrete to abstract, we have learned one of the maxim of teaching. So we are doing like that. Unifying, next point is unifying the students' learning. In that, curriculum integration enables students to develop a unified view of the curriculum to broaden the context of their learning beyond single subject learners. Various subjects are being taken into consideration, and they can actually unify the students' learning with the help of the inculcation of different subjects reflecting the real world, which is very much important because a school and a society must be connected with each other. Then only a child can live in a society very peacefully, in harmony, and in prosperity. So he must be knowing what real world is. When curriculum is actually organized in holistic way, it better reflects the real world. The researchers are saying that when it is organized in a holistic way than in fragmentation way, it is actually reflecting the real world, the way children learn at home and in the community. Also, the last point is matching the way students think. It actually means that teaching ideas holistically rather than in fragmented pieces, what I have said earlier, better reflects how young students' brain process information. So here it is actually said that teacher must teach in a way of holistic way. Teacher must actually promote the holistic way of teaching so that the younger children are actually better reflecting in this manner. So these are all about the integration curriculum. When we take next curriculum, core curriculum. Core curriculum, it is actually a set of common courses required of all undergraduate and consider the necessary general education for students and irrespective of their choice in major. Yeah, I'll just say, for example, it is actually if one student is studying, if one student is doing her major in any science subject, means if we are taking chemistry, then we'll be having the subsidiary courses, right? What are the subsidiary courses? We'll be learning physics, maths, English, literature, second languages, etc. So, with effect to the major subject, we'll be asked to learn the subsidiary courses also. This is actually meant by core curriculum. So, this design focuses on the set of learning experience that are felt to be essential for all students, and problem solving through reflective thinking is being encouraged. Then only he can actually confront the problems that is occurring in his future life. Then quality standards are being delivered. So these are the points related to the core curriculum. And when we are taking next curriculum into consideration, board feed curriculum. In board feed curriculum, it is actually a structure for achieving educational outcomes that combines related subjects into one broad field of study. And the purpose is to highlight relationship between subjects and to integrate the learning experience. Because if we are looking into this picture, general science is being taken, and in that various subjects are physics, chemistry, biology, astronomy, geology. So definition of we'll get a definition of generalization and understandings of general science, what it is actually, and through that objectives can be determined, and also selection and organization of learning experiences. Through the determination of objectives, various learning experiences can be got for the children. And also last if we, the important step, which is actually evaluation. Through evaluation only we can understand what is actually got to the child. So it is actually broad field of curriculum is actually meant that it's actually a holistic curriculum. It is actually sometimes called holistic curriculum, as under a certain topic various other subjects are being brought into consideration, and they are actually showing a relationship between each subject. This is actually board feed curriculum. And the last curriculum, hidden curriculum. As the name suggests, it is being hidden, as it is refers to the unwritten, unofficial, and often unintended lessons, values, and perspectives that students learn in school. Actually, we learn various manners that is how we must treat our elders, our peers, our other adults, and all. How the interaction must be done, and how they should perceive different races, groups, or classes of people. These are the things means how we must treat a person individually. The level of treating a person individually is being taught in a school, and it is actually a hidden curriculum because it is not written. Even though it is not written, it is being taught, and it consists of the unspoken academics, cultural, and social messages that are communicated to students while they are in school. So, knowingly or unknowingly, teachers are teaching us lessons about the formal curriculum because we are actually we are learning the moral values from after home. We are learning the moral values from the school. So teachers have a very good role in teaching the moral values, how we must treat each other. Gender equality is very much essential thought nowadays because various people think that we must that teachers must inculcate the idea that every individual must be treated equally, and there is no superior or inferior in among human beings. So these are some of the values that must be taught in the schools. Also, it is usually unacknowledged or unexamined by students, educators, and the wider community. We are not at all acknowledged about all these things, even though it is not unacknowledged. It is unacknowledged and unexamined by the students, educators, and wider community. Even though this is being unacknowledged, it is being taught unintentionally. I think hidden curriculum can reinforce the lessons of formal curriculum, or it can contradict the formal curriculum. It can reveal inconsistencies between a school's stated mission, values, and convictions. I think that in effect to the academic process, also there is a very good role in teaching the moral values in a child, because in accordance with the academics, moral values must be inculcated in a child for creating a better citizen. So these are all about the different curriculums. I hope it is clear. Thank you.
I think all heard about her discussion and presentation. So if any doubts you have, you can ask to Ansi. After that, I will conclude it. If you are listening, you must have some doubts.
Hello. Hello,
Hello.
Ansi.
Hello, Rosha.
What are the disadvantages of a hidden curriculum?
Hidden curriculum, I think there are no such disadvantages, but we must actually learn. We must actually teach students what hidden curriculum is actually. Um, According to me, there is no disadvantage because it is actually very much essential for a student's development, students' overall development. Because the things that we learn from schools and home, it is actually meant to be the hidden curriculum. And according to me, there is no such disadvantage. I don't know whether there is any disadvantage about the hidden curriculum. Rosha?
Okay, Ansi.
Please don't lose the time. ബാക്കി എല്ലാവർക്കും എല്ലാം മനസ്സിലായോ? ഞാൻ തിരിച്ച് അങ്ങോട്ട് ചോദിക്കേ ആൻസി പഠിപ്പിച്ചത് ഇന്ന്. At least after one seminar, you have to ask 2 to 3 questions because I already told you that she performed or she collected that much details about curriculum, and mainly she mentioned how many curriculum you mentioned, Nancy? Total number?
Eight.
Eight types of curriculum and its features. All of you understood all this. That my question is. All of you understood the 8 curriculums she mentioned here? If your answer is yes, you can give an yes in the chat box. Otherwise, how many of you took that other 8 list ചെയ്തെടുത്ത് എത്ര പേരുണ്ട്? Okay, I think all of you understood the 8 types of curriculum. അത് എന്താണ് എന്ന് എല്ലാവർക്കും മനസ്സിലായി ഞാൻ വിശ്വസിക്കട്ടെ. Okay, so now I'm going to conclude it. She presented it in a very nice way and she collected so much of details. Okay, congratulations Anzi for that.
Thank you.
Now I'm adding some more to that. When we are saying curriculum types, you have to look at how it comes, how it can be divided. Basically, curriculum is all these are different types of curriculum based on the content or the content organization. Okay, so all these things what she mentioned in her discussion was content, how the content is really oriented in the curriculum. So now I'm going to discuss mainly when we are saying curriculum. It is of 4 types of curriculum basically. That is explicit curriculum, implicit curriculum, null curriculum, extra curriculum. Okay, this is the main 4 types of curriculum: explicit, implicit, null, extra. So there's a general way of curriculum differentiation, and the other one is when we are gone to the explicit curriculum, how does all this curriculum are really involved in what she discussed. In Nancy's discussion, all this curriculum are involved, but when we are considering more, it is relating with explicit curriculum. So what is these 4 types of curriculum? Explicit means the subjects that will be taught and the knowledge and the skills the school is really transmitting to the students through the class. അതായത് നിങ്ങളുടെ ക്ലാസ്സിൽ നിങ്ങളെ ടീച്ചർ പഠിപ്പിക്കുന്നത് കൊണ്ടോ ക്ലാസ് റൂമിലെ ആക്ടിവിറ്റീസ് കൊണ്ടോ നിങ്ങളിലേക്ക് വരുന്ന നോളേജിനെയും സ്കില്ലിനെയും ആറ്റിറ്റ്യൂഡിനെയുമാണ് നമ്മൾ എക്സ്പ്ലിസിറ്റ് കറിക്കുലത്തിൽ ഉൾപ്പെടുത്തുന്നത്. The subjects or that may be the knowledge, that may be the skill, that may be the attitude that is going to develop in you through the activities that is really organizing inside the class. Okay, what is implicit? Implicit means it is not something that we are teaching inside the class, but it is something we are getting only because we belong to that institution. ഓക്കെ, അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് നിങ്ങൾ ഒരു സ്കൂളിൽ കോളേജിൽ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു സ്കൂളിൽ പഠിച്ചിട്ട് ഇറങ്ങുമ്പോൾ നിങ്ങൾക്ക് അതിൻ്റെ ഒരു സിഗ്നേച്ചർ കാണും അല്ലേ, ആ ഇൻസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂഷൻ്റെ ഒരു സിഗ്നേച്ചർ കാണും. ഓക്കെ, ആ സിഗ്നേച്ചറിനെയാണ് നമ്മൾ ഇംപ്ലിസിറ്റ് കരിക്കുലം എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. ദാറ്റ് റിയലി ഫ്രം ദ കൾച്ചർ ഓഫ് ദാറ്റ് ഇൻസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂഷൻ, the behaviors, the attitudes or the expectations that അതുകൊണ്ടാണല്ലോ നമ്മൾ പറയുന്നത് ഒരേ കണ്ടന്റ് ആണ് സെൽഫ് ഫൈനാൻസിംഗിൽ പഠിപ്പിക്കുന്നത് ആണ്. ഐ മീൻ ഒരേ സംഭവം കരിക്കുലം സെയിം കരിക്കുലം ആണെങ്കിൽ പോലും അല്ലെങ്കിൽ കുറച്ചുകൂടെ ഹയർ കരിക്കുലം ആണെങ്കിൽ പോലും എന്തുകൊണ്ടാണ് ഒരു സെൽഫ് ഫൈനാൻസിങ് കോളേജിൽ പഠിക്കുന്ന കുട്ടിയും IIT-യിൽ പഠിക്കുന്ന കുട്ടിയുടെയും ആറ്റിറ്റ്യൂഡ് ഡിഫറെന്റ് ആകുന്നത്? ഒരു കുട്ടി IIT-യിൽ പഠിച്ച് പുറത്തിറങ്ങുന്ന കുട്ടിയെ സംബന്ധിച്ചിടത്തോളം ബേസിക് ആയിട്ട് 2 സ്കിൽ ഉറപ്പായിട്ടും ഉണ്ടാവും, പ്രോബ്ലം സോൾവിങ് സ്കില്ലും ക്രിയേറ്റിവിറ്റിയും. ഇത് രണ്ടും ഇല്ലാതെ ഒരു കുട്ടിക്ക് IIT പാസ് ആവാൻ പറ്റില്ല. ഓക്കെ, അപ്പൊ ഓൾറെഡി അത് കിട്ടണമെങ്കിൽ മിനിമം നോളജും സ്കില്ലും ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ മാത്രമേ കുട്ടിക്ക് IIT കിട്ടാൻ പറ്റൂ. IIT എൻട്രൻസ് പാസ് ആകുന്ന ഒരു കുട്ടി ഉറപ്പായിട്ടും അയാളുടെ കോഴ്സ് ഐ തിങ്ക് കോഴ്സ് കഴിഞ്ഞ് പുറത്തിറങ്ങുമ്പോൾ ആ കുട്ടിയിലും മസ്റ്റായിട്ട് ഞാൻ പറയുന്ന മിനിമം സ്കിൽസ് ആണ്, മിനിമം ഈ 2 സ്കിൽസ് ആ കുട്ടിയിലുണ്ട്. അത് സെയിം വിത്ത് നമ്മുടെ IIM ഓൾസോ. IIM-ൽ പോകുമ്പോഴും ഇതുപോലെ തന്നെയാണ്. എന്തുകൊണ്ടാണ് IIM-ന് ഇത്ര പ്രസ്റ്റീജിയസ്? IIM are really providing diploma. They are not providing degree. They are providing diploma, PG diploma, UG diploma like that. But അവരുടെ കോഴ്സിന്റെ വാല്യൂ is different because they know how to manage any crisis situation. ഒരു ക്രൈസിസ് സിറ്റുവേഷൻ എങ്ങനെ മാനേജ് ചെയ്യണമെന്ന് അവർ പഠിക്കുന്നു. എല്ലാം സേഫ് അല്ല, അവിടെ സേഫ് അല്ലാത്ത സിറ്റുവേഷനെ സേഫ് ആക്കാൻ അവിടുത്തെ പ്രോഗ്രാമിലൂടെ അവർ പഠിക്കുന്നു. ഈ ഒരു ലേണിങ്ങിനെയാണ് നമ്മൾ ഇംപ്ലിസിറ്റ് കരിക്കുലം എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. ദാറ്റ് ഈസ് വി ആർ ലേണിംഗ് ത്രൂ ദ കൾച്ചർ ആൻഡ് അതർ മൊഡാലിറ്റീസ് ഇൻസൈഡ് ദ ഇൻസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂഷൻ. ഇപ്പൊ അതിന് വളരെ സിമ്പിൾ ആയിട്ട് പറയുകയാണെങ്കിൽ ഒരു ക്രിസ്ത്യൻ ഇൻസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂഷനിൽ ദാറ്റ് പേഴ്സൺ മേ ബിലോങ് ടു എനി കാസ്റ്റ് ഓർ എനി റിലീജിയൻ ഓർ സം. പക്ഷെ കൊച്ചിലെ മുതൽ ഒരു ക്രിസ്ത്യൻ ഇൻസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂഷൻ പഠിക്കുന്ന ഒരാൾക്ക് ക്രിസ്ത്യാനിറ്റിയോടുള്ള ആറ്റിറ്റ്യൂഡ് വേറെ ആയിരിക്കും. അതുപോലെ തന്നെ ഹിന്ദു ഇൻസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂഷനിൽ പഠിക്കുന്ന ഒരാൾക്ക് അത് ആ ആൾക്ക് കാരണം ആൾ കേൾക്കുന്നത്, ആൾ കാണുന്നത്, ആൾ മനസ്സിലാക്കുന്നത് എല്ലാം ആ ഒരു തിയോളജി വാട്ട് എവർ ഇറ്റ് ഈസ് അതുമായിട്ട് ബന്ധപ്പെട്ട കാര്യങ്ങളാണ്. അപ്പൊ അതുകൊണ്ട് ആളിൽ ഓൾറെഡി ഒരു ഇൻബിൽട്ട് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു കാര്യം വരുന്നു. ഇതിനെയാണ് നമ്മൾ ഇംപ്ലിസിറ്റ് കരിക്കുലം എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. ഓക്കെ, അത് നിങ്ങൾ വേറൊരു രീതിയിൽ നിങ്ങൾക്ക് അതെടുക്കാം. നമ്മൾ എടുക്കുന്ന ലാംഗ്വേജ് പഠിക്കുന്ന കുട്ടിയുടെ ആറ്റിറ്റ്യൂഡും സയൻസ് പഠിക്കുന്ന കുട്ടിയുടെ ആറ്റിറ്റ്യൂഡും ഡിഫറെന്റ് ആണ്. ഓക്കെ, കാരണം ഈ പറയുന്ന സബ്ജക്ട് നമുക്ക് തരുന്ന ആറ്റിറ്റ്യൂഡ് ഡിഫറെന്റ് ആണ്, ബിഹേവിയർ പാറ്റേൺ ഡിഫറെന്റ് ആണ്. അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് അവരുടെ ടോട്ടൽ പെർഫോമൻസ് ഡിഫറെന്റ്. അത് ഞാൻ പറയുന്ന മാർക്ക് ബേസിലല്ല. എക്കണോമിക്സ് പഠിച്ച IAS കിട്ടണമെങ്കിൽ എക്കണോമിക്സ് ആണ് പഠിക്കേണ്ടത്. അപ്പോ ബേസിക്കലി എക്കണോമിക്സ് വിത്ത് മാത്സ് ഉള്ളവർക്കാണ് മോർ IAS കിട്ടുന്നത്. അപ്പൊ എക്കണോമിക്സ് എടുക്കുന്നവരെല്ലാം മോശക്കാരാണെന്നല്ലല്ലോ അതിന്റെ അർത്ഥം. പക്ഷെ ഇതേ എക്കണോമിക്സ് വേറെ ഒന്നിനും കിട്ടാതെ എക്കണോമിക്സ് പഠിക്കുന്നവരും ഉണ്ട്. ഓക്കെ, സോ അത് വേറെ വിഷയം. അപ്പൊ ഞാൻ പറയുന്നത് എന്നെ വിഷയം എടുക്കുന്നു എന്നുള്ളതല്ല, ഏത് ഇൻസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂഷനിൽ എങ്ങനെ പഠിക്കുന്നു എന്നതിന്റെ ആഫ്റ്റർ എഫക്റ്റ് ആയിട്ട് നമ്മുടെ ആറ്റിറ്റ്യൂഡിലും നമ്മുടെ എക്സ്പെക്ടേഷനിലും ഉണ്ടാകുന്ന വ്യത്യാസം, അതിനെ ആ ഹിഡൻ ആയിട്ടുള്ള ആ സംഭവത്തെയാണ് നമ്മൾ ഇംപ്ലിസിറ്റ് കരിക്കുലം എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. When you go for next one, that is null curriculum. Null curriculum എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ I think Ansi already discussed. Null curriculum പറഞ്ഞെന്ന് തോന്നുന്നു Ansi, അല്ലേ Ansi? കേട്ടതുപോലെ തോന്നി പറഞ്ഞില്ല? ഓക്കെ ഓക്കെ. നൾ കരിക്കുലം എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ പഠിപ്പിക്കാത്ത കരിക്കുലത്തെയാണ് നൾ കരിക്കുലം എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. അത് ഒരു കരിക്കുലത്തിൽ ഇൻബിൽറ്റ് ആയിട്ടുണ്ട്, പക്ഷേ ടീച്ചർ ഇഗ്നോർ ചെയ്ത് കളയും, അത് പഠിപ്പിക്കുകയില്ല. സോ ഇവിടെ എന്റെ ആവശ്യമില്ല എന്നുള്ളതാണ്. ഓക്കെ, ഇപ്പൊ ഈ കുട്ടി നമ്മൾ പറയില്ലേ പ്രീവിയസ് നോളേജ് എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ഒരു കോൺസെപ്റ്റ് ഉണ്ട് ടീച്ചറിന്. അപ്പൊ നമ്മൾ ടേക്ക് ഓഫ് നമ്മൾ ചെക്ക് ചെയ്യുന്നൊന്നുമില്ല, കുട്ടിക്ക് ഇത് അറിയാൻ. ഇപ്പൊ ഉദാഹരണത്തിനായിട്ട് ഒരു കുട്ടിയെ നമ്മൾ ഫിസിക്സ് പഠിപ്പിക്കുന്നു, നമ്മൾ ക്ലാസ്സിലോട്ട് കയറിയിട്ട് ഓക്കെ ഐ എം യുവർ ഫിസിക്സ് ടീച്ചർ ആൻഡ് ഐ ആം ഗോയിങ് ടു ടീച്ച് യു അബൌട്ട് മാറ്റർ. ഓക്കെ സന്തോഷം, കുട്ടിക്ക് സന്തോഷം, ടീച്ചറിന് സന്തോഷം. അടുത്ത പീരീഡിൽ കെമിസ്ട്രി ടീച്ചർ വരുന്നു, ടീച്ചർ ഐ എം യുവർ കെമിസ്ട്രി ടീച്ചർ, ഐ എം ഗോയിങ് ടു ടീച്ച് യു അബൌട്ട് മാറ്റർ. ഇത് തന്നെയല്ലേ ഫിസിക്സ് ടീച്ചറും പഠിപ്പിക്കുന്നത്. സോ ബോത്ത് ഓഫ് യു ആർ ടീച്ചിങ് ദി സെയിം പോർഷൻ, then why two topics with the same teacher? എന്തുകൊണ്ടാ കൺഫ്യൂഷൻ? കുട്ടിക്ക് അറിഞ്ഞുകൂടാ ഫിസിക്സ് ടീച്ചർ പഠിപ്പിക്കാൻ പോകുന്ന മാറ്ററും കെമിസ്ട്രി ടീച്ചർ പഠിപ്പിക്കാൻ പോകുന്ന മാറ്ററും തമ്മിൽ എന്താ വ്യത്യാസം? അത് മനസ്സിലാക്കണമെങ്കിൽ എന്താണ് ഫിസിക്സ്, എന്താണ് കെമിസ്ട്രി എന്ന് കുട്ടിക്ക് അറിയായിരിക്കണം. അപ്പോ ഇതാണ്. പക്ഷെ ടീച്ചർ പറഞ്ഞു കൊടുക്കൂ? ഇല്ല, ടീച്ചർ പറഞ്ഞു കൊടുക്കും. ഐ എം എ ഫിസിക്സ് ടീച്ചർ. എന്താണ് ഫിസിക്സ്? അത് ടീച്ചർ പറഞ്ഞു കൊടുക്കുന്നില്ല. അപ്പൊ ഇതാണ് ടീച്ചർ. എന്തുകൊണ്ട് ടീച്ചർ പറയുന്നതെന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ കൊച്ചിന് ഓൾറെഡി ഫിസിക്സ് എന്താണെന്ന് അറിയാവുന്ന ടീച്ചർ ഗ്രാൻഡഡ് ആണ്. അത് ടീച്ചർ പറയണേ കുട്ടിയിലതുണ്ട്, കുട്ടിക്ക് അറിയാം, പക്ഷെ സത്യത്തിൽ കുട്ടിക്ക് അറിഞ്ഞൂടാ. ഇങ്ങനെയുള്ളതിനെയാണ് നൾ കരിക്കുലം എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. ദാറ്റ് ഈസ് ദീസ് കരിക്കുലർ ആസ്പെക്ട്സ് that is already a part of their intellectual content, but they are not at all transmitted through the classroom. ടീച്ചറാണ് ഒരു പരിധി വരെ അത് കരിക്കുലത്തിൽ പറയണമെന്നുണ്ട്, പക്ഷെ ടീച്ചർ അത് ഇഗ്നോർ ചെയ്ത് കളയുന്നു. അതാണ് ഇഗ്നോർ ചെയ്യുകയല്ല, ടീച്ചറെ സംബന്ധിച്ചിടത്തോളം അത് കുട്ടിക്ക് അറിയാം, ടേക്ക് ഫോർ ഗ്രാൻഡ് ആണ്. അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് അങ്ങനെ വരുന്ന കരിക്കുലർ ആസ്പെക്ട് വിച്ച് ഇസ് നോട്ട് അറ്റ് ഓൾ, ദാറ്റ് ഈസ് ദ പോയിന്റ്, വിച്ച് ഇസ് നോട്ട് അറ്റ് ഓൾ ട്രാൻസ്മിറ്റഡ് ഇൻ ദ ക്ലാസ് റൂം interaction, even if that is very much needed in the classroom interaction. That is the null curriculum. And the fourth one is extra curriculum. Extra curriculum എന്ന് ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നത് ഇത് നമുക്കറിയാവുന്ന നമ്മുടെ എക്സ്ട്രാ കരിക്കുലർ ആക്ടിവിറ്റീസ് ആണ്. പിന്നെ സ്കൂളിൽ പഠിച്ച ബാൻഡിൽ പങ്കെടുക്കുക, ഇന്ന സ്കൂളിൽ പഠിച്ച ഗൈഡിൽ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ സ്കൗട്ടില്, NCC, NSS, അവിടെ നമുക്ക് എല്ലാവരും പറയും മാറിവാനിയോസ് കോളേജിൽ വന്ന് പഠിച്ചാൽ സ്പോർട്സിലും ആർട്സിലും ദ ബെസ്റ്റ് കോളേജ്. അക്കാദമിക്സ് ഇല്ല എന്നല്ല, പക്ഷെ ആർട്സില് നല്ല അവർക്ക് ഭയങ്കര സ്പിരിറ്റ് ആണ്. കലോത്സവത്തിന് പോകുമ്പോൾ ഇവാനോസിന് ഞങ്ങൾക്ക് കിട്ടാവുന്ന സ്പിരിറ്റ് ആണ്. when it go to sports also അവർക്ക് സ്പിരിറ്റ് ആണ്. ഞങ്ങൾക്കൊരു ഇതിൽ അത് ആ സ്പിരിറ്റ് ഉള്ളത് കൊണ്ട് ഏബിൾ ആയിട്ടുള്ളവരെ അവർ അതിൻ്റെ അകത്തോട്ട് കയറ്റിവിടും. അല്ലെങ്കിൽ കണ്ടുപിടിച്ചിട്ട് ആർക്കാണോ പൈസ ചെലവാക്കി പോകാൻ പറ്റുന്നത് അവരെ കണ്ടുപിടിച്ച് ചാൻസ് കൊടുക്കും. അപ്പൊ ഇത് ഈ ഒരു ചാൻസ് കൊടുക്കുന്നു, ചാൻസ് കിട്ടാതെ നമുക്ക് വളരാൻ പറ്റില്ലല്ലോ. അപ്പൊ ആ ചാൻസ് കിട്ടുന്നു എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് ആണ് നമ്മളിവിടെ പറയുന്ന എക്സ്ട്രാ കരിക്കുലം. അപ്പൊ അതുമായിട്ട് അതായത് രണ്ട് രീതിയിലുണ്ട്. കോളേജ് തന്നെ സ്പോൺസർ ചെയ്ത് എടുക്കുന്ന പ്രോഗ്രാംസും ഉണ്ട്. ദാറ്റ് ഈസ് റിയലി addition to the academic aspect. That is, extracurriculum is the curricular aspect the institution provides in addition or in supplement to the academic aspect of the syllabus. സാധാരണ ഒരു സിലബസിന്റെയോ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ സാധാരണ ഒരു കരിക്കുലത്തിന്റെയോ കൂടെ എക്സ്ട്രാ ആയിട്ട് എന്തൊക്കെ കാര്യങ്ങൾ നമുക്കറിയാവുന്ന ഒരു കാര്യം. ഇപ്പൊ വേറൊരു ഉദാഹരണം പറഞ്ഞാല് പ്ലസ് ടു പഠിക്കുന്ന ഒരു കുട്ടിക്ക് നമ്മൾ പറയും എൻട്രൻസ് കോച്ചിങ് കൂടെ കൊടുക്കുക എന്ന് പറയും അല്ലെ. അത് സ്കൂളിന്റെ പോളിസിയാണ്. അപ്പൊ നിങ്ങൾ ഇവിടെ വന്ന് പ്ലസ് ടു പഠിച്ചാല് പ്ലസ് ടുവിന് ഇന്ന ഏജന്റ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഇന്ന പിന്നെ ഏജൻസി വാട്ട് എവർ ഇറ്റ് ഈസ് ഇൻസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂഷന്റെ പാലായിൽ നിന്ന് വരും അല്ലെങ്കിൽ കാഞ്ഞിരപ്പള്ളിയിൽ നിന്ന് വരും വേറെ ഇറ്റ് ഈസ് അവര് വന്നിട്ട് ഇവിടെ ഒരു കോഴ്സ് എടുക്കുമെന്ന് പറയും. അപ്പൊ ആ ഒരു അത് കേൾക്കുമ്പോൾ ഒരു സന്തോഷമാണ്. അപ്പൊ കുട്ടി എന്ത് ചെയ്യും, ആ കോഴ്സും കൂടെ നോക്കിയിട്ട് പോയി ചെയ്യും. ഇപ്പൊ വേറെ പിന്നെ അങ്ങനെ ഏത് കോഴ്സും അങ്ങനെയാണ്. ഇപ്പൊ ചില കോളേജ് സ്കൂൾസ് ചില സ്കൂൾസ് ആൻഡ് സം കോളേജസ് ഓൾസോ ദേ ആർ പ്രൊവൈഡിങ് IAS. ചില കോളേജസ് ദേ ആർ പ്രൊവൈഡിങ് CA. BCom എടുത്താൽ CA അഡീഷണൽ ആണ്. BComന്റെ കോഴ്സ് ചെയ്യണം, അതോടൊപ്പം നിങ്ങൾ CAക്കും കൂടെ നിങ്ങൾ പ്രിപ്പയർ ചെയ്യും. അപ്പൊ ഇങ്ങനെ ഓരോ അഡീഷണൽ ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു സംഭവം കൊടുക്കുക. അതിനാണ് നമ്മൾ എക്സ്ട്രാ കരിക്കുലം എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. വിച്ച് ഇസ് നോട്ട് ഓൺലി ബിലോങ് ടു ദ കരിക്കുലം ബട്ട് ആസ് ആൻ എക്സ്ട്രാ എലമെന്റ് ദേ ആർ പ്രൊവൈഡിങ് സം സപ്ലിമെന്ററി ആസ്പെക്ട് ഓഫ് ദ കരിക്കുലം. സോ ഇതോടെ പറഞ്ഞതേ ഉള്ളൂ. ഇത് ചിലപ്പോൾ ചോദിക്കും. ഇതിപ്പോ ആ ഓരോ എലമെന്റും ഇപ്പം ആൻസി പറഞ്ഞ പോയിന്റ്സ് എല്ലാം തന്നെ നിങ്ങൾക്ക് 2 മാർക്കിന്റെ ചോദ്യമായിട്ട് വരാവുന്നതാണ്. അതിന്റെ കൂടെ തന്നെ വരാവുന്ന ഒരു 4 എലമെന്റും കൂടെ ഞാൻ ആഡ് ചെയ്തു എന്ന് മാത്രമേ ഉള്ളൂ. എക്സ്പ്ലിസിറ്റും ഇംപ്ലിസിറ്റും നല്ല എക്സ്ട്രാ കരിക്കുലം. ഇനി നിങ്ങൾ പഠിക്കേണ്ട ഒരു കാര്യം കൂടെ, അതൊരു എക്സാം ഓറിയന്റഡ് എന്നുള്ള രീതിയിൽ ഞാൻ പറയുന്നതാണ്. ഞാൻ ഈ പറയുന്ന പോയിന്റ്സ് ഒന്ന് നോട്ട് ചെയ്യണം. അത് either Nancy can write it for your friends or you can write it by yourself and share it with others. അതായത് നിങ്ങൾ ഒരു ടേബിൾ ഉണ്ടാക്കണം. അതായത് മെയിൻ ആയിട്ട് നമ്മൾ കരിക്കുലം എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ നമ്മുടെ മനസ്സിലേക്ക് വരുന്ന 3 ടൈപ്പ് ഓഫ് കരിക്കുലം ഉള്ളത്. ബേസിക്കലി ഇപ്പം ആൻസി പറഞ്ഞ എല്ലാം ഉണ്ട്. അത് കൂടാതെ ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞതും കൂടാതെ കരിക്കുലം എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ ഈ യവനയ്ക്കുള്ളിൽ കടന്നു വന്ന കരിക്കുലർ ആസ്പെക്ടിന്റെ ബേസിക് കരിക്കുലത്തെ നമുക്ക് 3 ആയിട്ട് തിരിക്കാൻ പറ്റുള്ളൂ. ബാക്കിയൊക്കെ പലരും തിരിച്ചിരിക്കുന്നതാണ്. അതിൽ ഒന്നാമത്തേത് ആദ്യ കാലത്ത് ടീച്ചർ സെന്റേർഡ് ആയിരുന്നു. ആദ്യ കാലത്തെ കരിക്കുലം ടീച്ചർ സെന്റേർഡ് ആയിരുന്നു. പിന്നീട് കുറെ കാലം കഴിഞ്ഞപ്പോൾ അത് സബ്ജക്ട് സെന്റേർഡ് ആയി. ഇപ്പൊ അത് ചൈൽഡ് സെന്റേർഡ് ആണ്. ഈ 3 രീതിയിൽ നമുക്ക് സത്യത്തിൽ ഇപ്പൊ ഈ 3 രീതി മാത്രമേ നമുക്ക് കരിക്കുലത്തെ ബേസിക് ആയിട്ട് തിരിക്കാൻ പറ്റുള്ളൂ. അപ്പൊ നിങ്ങൾ ചെയ്യേണ്ടത് ഈ 3 കരിക്കുലത്തെ, അതായത് ടീച്ചർ സെന്റേർഡ്, സബ്ജക്ട് സെന്റേർഡ്, ആക്ടിവിറ്റി സെന്റേർഡ്, ഈ 3 കരിക്കുലത്തെയും ടീച്ചർ സെന്റേർഡ്, സബ്ജക്ട് സെന്റേർഡ്, ആക്ടിവിറ്റി സെന്റേർഡ് അല്ല ചൈൽഡ് സെന്റേർഡ്. അത് തന്നെയാണ് ആക്ടിവിറ്റി സെന്റേർഡ്, അത് തന്നെയാണ് സെയിം ആണ്, ചൈൽഡ് സെന്റേർഡ് തന്നെയാണ്. അപ്പോ ഈ 3 രീതി ചൈൽഡ് സെന്റേർഡ് അല്ല കേട്ടോ, ലേണർ സെന്റേർഡ്, അതങ്ങനെ തന്നെ പറയണം. ചൈൽഡ് സെന്റേർഡ് ഈസ് ഫോർ ലോവർ ക്ലാസ്സസ്, മറ്റേത് ലേണർ സെന്റേർഡ് ആണ്. കറക്റ്റ് വേർഡ് ലേണർ ആണ്. ടീച്ചർ, സബ്ജക്ട്, ലേണർ, ആ 3 അതൊരു കോളം ആക്കണം. ഈ 3 സെന്റേർഡ് കരിക്കുലം കോളം ആക്കിയ ശേഷം ഈ പറയുന്ന എലമെന്റിൽ ഈ 3ഉം എങ്ങനെ വ്യത്യാസപ്പെട്ടിരിക്കുന്നു, ഞാൻ നിങ്ങൾക്കൊരു 10 ക്രൈറ്റീരിയ തരാൻ പോവാം. ഈ 10 ക്രൈറ്റീരിയയിൽ ഈ പറയുന്ന 3 എലമെന്റ്, ഈ 3 ടൈപ്പ് ഓഫ് കരിക്കുലം എങ്ങനെ വ്യത്യാസപ്പെട്ടിരിക്കുന്നു എന്ന് എഴുതണം. ഫസ്റ്റ് ഒന്നാമത്തെ കാര്യം ഇവരുടെ കരിക്കുലർ ഒബ്ജക്റ്റീവ്സിലുള്ള വ്യത്യാസം. ഓക്കെ. സെക്കൻഡ് കണ്ടന്റ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ കോഴ്സ്. അതായത് ഇതിലെല്ലാം കണ്ടന്റ്, അവർ കണ്ടന്റ് എഴുതുന്ന രീതിയിൽ അല്ലെ അവർ ഏതൊക്കെ കോഴ്സിനാണ് ഇത് പറ്റുന്നത്, ഏതൊക്കെ കോഴ്സിനാണ് കൂടുതൽ, അത് നിങ്ങൾക്ക് നിങ്ങളുടെ അഭിപ്രായം എഴുതാം. കണ്ടന്റ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ കോഴ്സ്. മൂന്നാമത്തെ എലമെന്റ് നിങ്ങൾ എഴുതേണ്ടത് റിസോഴ്സസ്. ഇതിന് എന്ത് വ്യത്യാസമാണ്, റിസോഴ്സസിന് എന്ത് വ്യത്യാസമാണ് ഉള്ളത് ഈ 3 കരിക്കുലത്തിൽ. 4 റോൾ ഓഫ് ടീച്ചറിന്റെ റോള് എങ്ങനെ വ്യത്യാസപ്പെട്ടിരിക്കുന്നു. 5 റോൾ ഓഫ് ലേണറിന്റെ റോളിൽ വ്യത്യാസം. Then go for 6th one, philosophical foundation. ഇതിന്റെ ഫിലോസഫിക്കൽ ഫൗണ്ടേഷൻ 3ന് 3 ആണ്. അത് ഏതൊക്കെയാണ്, അത് കുറച്ചൊക്കെ ആൻസി പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ട്. ഡിഫറൻഷിയേറ്റ് ചെയ്ത് പറഞ്ഞില്ല എന്നേ ഉള്ളൂ, അത് നോക്കുക. ഓരോന്നിന്റെ കീഴിൽ പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ട്, അപ്പൊ അത് കൃത്യമായിട്ട് എഴുതുക. ഫിലോസഫിക്കൽ ഫൗണ്ടേഷൻ. And seventh one is about relationships, അതായത് സോഷ്യൽ റിലേഷൻഷിപ്സിൽ ഇതെങ്ങനെയാണ് വ്യത്യാസം പറഞ്ഞിരിക്കുന്നത്. ഇത് മൂന്ന് ടൈപ്പ് ഓഫ് സോഷ്യൽ റിലേഷൻഷിപ്പ് ആണ്. അത് ടീച്ചറുമായിട്ടുള്ളതാണെങ്കിലും സൊസൈറ്റിയുമായിട്ടുള്ളതാണെങ്കിലും അവർ കമ്മ്യൂണിക്കേറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്ന ഡിഫറെന്റ് ടൈപ്സ് ഓഫ് റിലേഷൻഷിപ്പ് ആണ് അത്. ആൻഡ് ദ ഫോർത്ത് ഓക്കെ സോഷ്യൽ റിലേഷൻഷിപ്പ്. നെക്സ്റ്റ് വൺ ഈസ് ഇൻഡിവിജ്വലൈസേഷൻ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഇൻഡിവിജ്വലൈസ്ഡ്. ഇതിലേതാണ് ഇൻഡിവിജ്വലൈസ്ഡ് ആയിട്ട് വരുന്നത്? ഇൻഡിവിജ്വലൈസ്ഡ് എന്താണ് ട്രാൻസ്മിഷനോ അല്ലെ ഇൻഡിവിജ്വൽ ഓറിയന്റഡ് എന്നൊക്കെ എഴുതാം. ഇൻഡിവിജ്വൽ ഓറിയന്റഡ് ആയിട്ടുള്ളത് എന്താണ്? ഓക്കെ, ആൻഡ് ഇൻഡിവിജ്വൽ ഓറിയന്റഡ്. നെക്സ്റ്റ് ഈസ് എക്സ്പീരിയൻസസ്. ഇത് പ്രൊവൈഡ് ചെയ്യുന്ന എക്സ്പീരിയൻസസിന്റെ വ്യത്യാസം, എക്സ്പീരിയൻസസ്. ആൻഡ് ദ ലാസ്റ്റ് വൺ ഈസ് അസസ്മെന്റ്. അസസ്മെന്റ് 10 എലമെന്റ് കിട്ടിയോ? 10 ക്രൈറ്റീരിയ കിട്ടിയോ എല്ലാവർക്കും?
Yes, I get
ഓക്കെ ഓക്കെ, ഒന്നുകൂടെ ഞാൻ പറയുകയാണ്. ഫസ്റ്റ് വൺ ഒബ്ജക്റ്റീവ്, കരിക്കുലർ ഒബ്ജക്റ്റീവ്. 2 കോഴ്സ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ കണ്ടന്റ്. മൂന്നാമത്തേത് മെറ്റീരിയൽസ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ റിസോഴ്സസ്. then go for role of teacher, role of learner, philosophical, social relationship, individualization അല്ലെങ്കിൽ individualized concept, experiences and assessment. ഈ ഇത്രയും ക്രൈറ്റീരിയയില് ഈ 3 ടൈപ്പ് ഓഫ് കരിക്കുലം എങ്ങനെയാണ് വ്യത്യാസപ്പെട്ടിരിക്കുന്നതെന്ന് നിങ്ങൾക്ക് എഴുതാൻ പറ്റിയാൽ you clearly know what is these 3 curriculum. ഒരു സെൽഫ് അസസ്മെന്റ് ടെക്നിക്കാണ്. നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ഈ കോളം, ഈ ഗ്രിഡ് എന്ന് പറയാം, ഈ ഗ്രിഡ് നിങ്ങൾക്ക് കംപ്ലീറ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുകയാണെങ്കിൽ നിങ്ങൾ ഈ 3 ടൈപ്പ് ഓഫ് കരിക്കുലവും പഠിച്ചു കഴിഞ്ഞു എന്ന് വിചാരിക്കാം ഏകദേശം. പിന്നെ ഇൻഡെപ്ത് ആയിട്ടുള്ളതാണ്, അത് വേറെ വിഷയം. നമ്മൾ ബി എഡിന് അത് പറയുന്നില്ല. ബി എഡിന് ആവശ്യമുള്ള കണ്ടന്റ് ഇത്രയും നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ആൻസർ ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റിയാൽ പഠിച്ചു കഴിഞ്ഞു. ഓക്കെ, so hereby we are ending that portion. ആഷ്ന ടൈം നോക്കിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുവാണോ ആഷ്ന? Okay, you can start and by that just അതിന്റെ ആദ്യത്തെ പ്രിൻസിപ്പൽസ് അങ്ങനെ പറയാം. So I am inviting Ashna because we have 7 minutes, no problem. 5-6 minutes, no കുഴപ്പമില്ല, പറ്റുന്നത്രയും പറയാ. Then we will continue on the next session. Okay, so that's a continuing session by Ashna. It's on principles of curriculum development, and it's again a long topic, very long topic. That's why I'm asking her to start. Okay, Ashna, please.
Respected teacher, my dear friends, in the last section we actually discussed about the definitions of curriculum and types of curriculum and what are the things, and now we are going to discuss about the principles of curriculum. Okay, can you see the PPT?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So coming to think about the principles of curriculum, there are mainly 10 principles of curriculum which I noted. And the first one is the principle of child-centeredness. It says that child should learn from experiences and activities, and also the need of the child should be satisfied. And it says that education activities should be meaningfully appropriate for the child for his all-round development. That is, not to design a curriculum, we should take in control or take in account of the all-round development of a child. Then curriculum should be according to the need, interest, capability, aptitudes, attitudes, and abilities of the pupil of the particular age. That is, in order to design a curriculum, we have to think from the particular age of that student, that what he is able to do, and what is the interest and need, what is his attitude about that concept, and all we have to taken care of on designing a curriculum. That is what the principle of child-centeredness says. That is, the child should learn from the experience and activities, and need of the child should be satisfied, and interest and motivation is maintained also, and the education activities should be meaningfully appropriate for this child for his all-round development. And also curriculum should be according to the need, interest, capability, aptitudes, attitudes, and abilities of the pupil of the particular age. And the next one is the principle of community centeredness. It says social needs and local needs of the learner should be taken into account. Actually, we are living in a community, and besides treating the child as an individual, we should also view him as a member of the society which he belongs. So that is why it says we have to take in control, take in account of the social and local needs of the that student or the learner. Reflects the value of democracy, ethics, and main concerns of the country should also be taken into account. And child should be in a position to face challenges. That is why I said that we have to make him feel that he's also a member of the society, and he should understand he should understand and try to solve the problems in a systematic way. And that is, child should be in a position to face challenges in his future life also. And coming to think about the next principle, that is the activity principle. It, according to this principle, says that curriculum should be full of activities. Actually, man is a active being. A curriculum should be provide activities for both physical and mental development in which child is interested. So the curriculum, it should be a collection of experiences, practical activities the student might learn with his personal efforts and experiences. That we are giving up activity which is not for merely for his interest or his for the time passing or something like that. It should be a collection of practical experiences, so that the student might learn from itself, from himself, from the personal efforts and experiences also. The content through activities. Okay, the next one is the content growth through activities, because it makes interest and help in the physical and intellectual growth of the child. That is, the activity we have given should be related with the content also. That is what it says, and it will develop the physical, mental, intellectual growth of a child. And the activity given should be creative as well as constructive. That is what says in the activity principle. Coming to think about the next principle, that is the principle of integration. It says that it should integrate child's activities and need. On the other hand, the need of the 21st century should be there. That means, for example, we say we are living in a digital era. So in a digital era, child, we should communicate the pupil by understanding the changes happening in this century. So we have to be a 21st century in order to communicate with the child. That is what it says, the principle of integration. And it also integrate the cognitive, affective, psychomotor objectives and abilities, and also the knowledge and experiences and objectives and content. Also, we should integrate all these things, that is the cognitive, affective, psychomotor objectives and abilities, also the knowledge and experiences, and also the objectives and content. By integration, we do not merely mean the integration of subjects, but what is required is the integration of the child's need in one hand, and the need of the democratic society on the other. We have to satisfy both the needs, that is the child's need and the democratic society, the need of the democratic society also. That is what is the principle of integration says. And the next principle is a forward-looking principle. That is the capability of adjustment in different circumstances of life. That is, we have to equip the child to face the challenges that will come across in the future life, and we have to make the child to solve the problems, to face the challenges that will come across in his future life. And also, curriculum should reflect an insight in the future. In the future life of the child. That is, the curriculum should reflect an insight into the future life of the child. That means the quality of foresightedness. That is actually means we have to develop we have to make the child to see the future challenges that will come across in his life, and also the solutions to it. That is what it says in the forward-looking principle. And the next one is the conservative principle. In the conservative principle, it says that we should cultivate a sense of respect for his tradition and culture. and also preserve the culture and traditions of the past should be transmitted to the next generation. That means simply we have to preserve and transmit the culture we had, and it also have to transmit to the, not only the preservation is actually not, it is not only talking about the preservation, but also we should transmit it to the next generation also. That is in the conservative principle says, that is we have to cultivate a sense of respect for his tradition and culture. We have to respect the tradition and also the culture, and also we have to transmit the culture we had it to the next generation, to the next generation. And the next one is the renewal principle. Renewal principle says that renewal the culture to suit requirement of the changing world. We all are living in a changing world, in a rapidly changing world. That is the word, rapidly changing world. While conserving and transmitting the cultural heritage, education should cater to renew the culture to suit the requirement of the changing life. That is the renewal principle. We have to renew the culture to the for the sake of the changing world also. That is what it says in the renewal principle. And the next one is the motivation principle, and it's a very important one. Motivation principle, the intrinsic motivation is needed for a child to learn effectively. In order to learn effectively, child needed intrinsic motivation. Then what is intrinsic motivation? Intrinsic motivation, it is an act of doing something without any obvious external rewards. He don't want any external rewards. He is doing with for his or her own sake, for his own pleasure, for her own pleasure. That is what is the intrinsic motivation. What is the role of the teacher, and what is the view of intrinsic motivation in teacher's view? What is the intrinsic motivation? Teacher's view is actually providing constructive criticism and allowing students to apply feedback increases the intrinsic motivation. That is, it is not a mere reinforcement for everything, but also we have to constructively criticize the things the students do, and students critics, and also provide feedback and also we have to provide feedback, or we have to receive the feedback from the students in order to increase the intrinsic motivation. Then motivation make easiness in child's mind in the learning process. That is, by actually saying what you can do it, you should do it. By this reinforcement, it make easiness. Yes, I can do it in child's mind. Yes, I can do it, and it is very easy. It makes an easiness in child's mind, and it will enhance the learning process very easily. And it must be goal oriented. It should thus motivate the pupil to actively participate in the learning process with an innate desire. That is what in the say. That is what it says. It must have a goal oriented. That is the student must learn actively with an innate desire. That is what the motivation principle says. And the maturity principle. The maturity principle says that curriculum should be suited for the mental and physical maturity of the child. That is, we are actually not merely learning things and actually omitting the things with the on the in the exam papers. From the things from what we are learning, we have to acquire things, and also we have to be mature one. The curriculum should be designed in such a way that it provides maturity for both physical, mental, and intellectual field of a child. That is, the maturity principle says the curriculum should be suited for the mental and physical maturity of the child. And the last but not the least, the principle of comprehensiveness. Actually, in a class, a variety of subjects to satisfy a variety of people from different backgrounds. Actually, the class is full of the students from different backgrounds with different intellectual and different grasping powers, and they are very different from each other, and the curriculum should comprehensive to cater the needs and total development of the child. The curriculum should be designed in such a way that it has to comprehensive to cater the need and total development of it. It should be very easy. It should be very comprehensive to learn the process or learn the thing to to all the students that is in the classroom and to the total development of the child. This is actually the principles of curriculum, that is the principles of comprehensiveness, maturity principle, motivation principle, renewal principle, constructive principle, forward looking principle, principle of integration, activity principle, principle of community centeredness, and the principle of child centeredness. And that is what that is all. And I hope you all learned the principles of curriculum, and thank you,
Gia, for the session.
My dear friends, today I am going to take a class about the significance of science laboratory. Let me share my screen.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So before moving towards the significance of science laboratory, we must know what a laboratory is. So we all know we will call laboratory as informally as lab. It is a facility or a place which provides controlled conditions or requirements to carry out a scientific or technological research or experiment. So in order to carry out a scientific or technological researches, we should have certain requirements, and laboratory it provides that specific requirements and controlled conditions to carry out those experiments. So different subjects or different field of study will be having different requirements to carry out their studies or researches, and their requirements will be different. So based on the requirements, these laboratory will be set up. For example, a science laboratory might be having a particle accelerator or a vacuum chamber, while a metallurgy laboratory will be having apparatus which is used for casting or refining metals. Likewise, a chemist or a biologist will be using a wet laboratory, since their studies and researches will be using acid solutions and all. There, at the same time, a psychologist laboratory will be having a one-way mirror or a hidden camera, since they are studying about the behavior. So based on the requirements or their mode of study, the requirements for their experiments will be different. So laboratory will be set up based on those experiments. So science, we can find a science library even in all places like schools, universities, in industries, in government, military facilities, even in ships or spacecraft. Everywhere you can see scientific laboratory. Next, let's see what is the importance of a science lab in schools. So we all know that science is entirely different from any other field of study or any other subjects. So in order to make the science study more effective, one has to understand its concept from beyond the textbook knowledge or a conventional classroom teaching. So science must be studied. The concept of this concept must be studied from beyond a textbook reading or a conventional classroom teaching. So in order to make the science effective, science teaching and learning effective, it should involve seeing, handling, and manipulating the real objects and materials. That means if the students is directly interacting with the materials, and they can compare the data they have collected from the book and the conventional study, conventional classroom teaching, and therefore they will get a more understanding about the concept. The science laboratory or lab equipments will allow the students to interact directly with the data they have gathered from the textbook or a conventional classroom teaching, and they will be having a more understanding about the concept or the theory they have studied, because they are getting a first-hand experience through these experiments, because they are performing experiments on their own and reaching at a result. As a result, they will be having a better understanding about the concept. So it is the one of the importance of laboratory works or the experiments, because they will be having a first-hand learning experience about that concept, and the concept will be understand more. So in laboratory, the students will be making use of models, experiments, and thereby understanding different scientific theories and concepts. So by using the science laboratory, both learning and teaching is becoming easier for teachers and students. So science learning and teaching is becoming more easier by using all these kinds of science experiments, laboratories, etc. So the school have to provide the science laboratory with latest supplements or equipments, thereby making the science more interesting and effective towards the students. So as a result, the students will be encouraged to bring significant contributions in the field of science. So by increasing science interest in students, they will be having they will bring significant contributions in the field of science. So this is the importance of why we need a science laboratory in schools, because it increases the curiosity of the students or the interest of the students in learning science and the concepts. So next we are going to look why this laboratory work is important, or what is the need of having laboratory works. So first one is it provide a permanent knowledge to the students, and this knowledge will be retained by the students for a longer period of time. So the knowledge that we acquire from a book or a conventional classroom teaching will be persistent only for a small period of time. In the case if the concept is studied through a laboratory work or through experiments, that knowledge will be persistent in the student's mind for a long period of time. So that it says that it provides a permanent knowledge about a concept. Second one, it makes the students familiar about the equipments and the terminologies that is used in the science. We know that in science there are many equipments or many terminologies. So by making use of the laboratory work, it will make the student familiar about the functioning of those equipments, the terminologies that we use in science. The next one is it helps the students to understand the underlying principles or theories behind the experimental techniques and test the theoretical knowledge with the real data. So since the students is carrying out experiment on their own and reaching at a result, it makes the students more understanding about the theories and principle, and it enables the students to understand the applicability and the limitations of a theory. So next one is it develop, as we said earlier, it develop a kind of scientific attitude and interest in the science among the students, and thereby they can have they will give a significant contribution to the field of science. Next, it developed a habit of tackling any problem by scientific method in systematic and organized way. So, while carrying out an experiment, a student is following some kind of systematic way to reach at a result. So, by doing all these kind of experiments, it will create a habit of solving the problem in a systematic way. So next is they provide a self-dependence or self-reliance among the students. Since they are doing all these experiments by their own, they are reaching at the result, it will create some kind of sense of self-dependence and self-reliance. The next is it develop a curiosity in the minds of the children. So what will be the result? So they will be curious about the concepts or the theories in science. So they will be developing a curiosity in the minds of young children. So by doing all this laboratory work, we are actually training the students to carry out a specific experimental methods or an experiment. Thereby, it helps the students to apply this kind of experimental knowledge for their further studies or for their further future. So these are the importance of laboratory work, or this is the reason why we need laboratory work. First, it provides permanent knowledge. Second, it makes the students familiar about the equipments and the terminologies that we use in science. And it helps the students to have a proper understanding about the underlying principles or the theories, and helps them to enable them to understand the applicability and the limitations of a theory. At the same time, it develops scientific attitude and also develop a habit of tackling or solving the problem in a systematic way. It also develops self-dependence and self-reliance. So all these are the importance of the why we need laboratory work. Next, let's see the materials that are available in laboratory. So we are all familiar about those materials that we are available in laboratory. So these are the materials we can find in laboratory. The first one is the observation aids. So observation aids means these are the apparatus which is used to measure the or used to measure mass, length, time. So the apparatus which is used to measure mass, length, time will be coming under observation aids. For example, chemical balance, meter scale, stopwatch. I'm sure that all are familiar with all these kind of apparatus. So all these apparatus which is used to measure mass, length, time will be coming under observation aids. Next one is controlled aids. So this involves apparatus which is used to measure temperature, pressure, or these are the apparatus which are associated with the phenomena like temperature, pressure, volume. For example, barometer, Boyle's law apparatus. These apparatus will be coming under controlled aids. Next one is glassware. So all are aware about the glasswares because we are using this in everyday laboratory. We are using that is glass jars, test tubes, funnels, pipette, every apparatus which is made of glass will be coming under glass wares. Then next is ancillary wares. These are the supporting instruments like stands, clamps. So in order to place pipette and burette, we'll be having stand in our laboratory. So all these equipments will be coming under ancillary wares. So materials, it means the consumable materials. That means the chemicals or acids, alcohols, those things that get consumed while carrying out an experiments will be coming under these materials like chemical reagents, specimens, consumable materials, etc. The next is teaching aids. So in a laboratory, they will be having a blackboard or a chart, model. So all these things will be coming under teaching aids. So next one is tool. Tool, it is an equipment which is used to repair or maintain apparatus. If there is any damages to the apparatus, there are certain tools to repair them. They will be coming under tools. So these are the commonly found materials in laboratory, that is observation aids, control aids, glass wares, ancillary wares, materials, teaching aids, and tools. So I hope you understand about the materials available. Next, let's look the registers in laboratory. So in laboratory, there are different kinds of apparatus. So it is very important to have a proper maintenance or a proper record about all these materials and apparatus in laboratory. So it is one of the most important duty of a teacher to maintain a proper record about all these apparatus. So what our apparatus will be there, if there is any damage, it will be recorded. So separate records or separate stock registers will be maintained for both consumable or non-consumable items or permanent items, glass articles. So separate stock registers will be there to maintain a proper record about all these apparatus. So last slide we discussed about the different apparatus. So these record about these apparatus will be stocked or registered separately in different stock registers. So there are mainly 5 registers that we can find in a laboratory or which is maintained in a laboratory, that is permanent stock register, breakable stock register, consumable stock register, order register, and requirement register. So these are the mostly found registers that we used in laboratory. So each will be having different functions or different apparatus details will be recorded in these registers. Let's look what are they. The first one is permanent stock register. So this register includes the informations about non-breakable or non-consumable articles. For example, the details about test tube racks, wood and how many of them are there. Like that way, the informations about non-breakable and non-consumable materials will be recorded in permanent stock register. For example, non-consumable materials like example test tube rack, wooden stands, microscope, telescope. So information about all these kinds will be recorded in permanent stock registers, and these are the specimens that we can find in a permanent stock register. So this register is used to to keep record about the non-breakable and non-consumable materials. The next one is breakable stock register. So as the name says, it is used to have to keep record about the glasswares like flasks, test tubes, beakers, pipettes, burettes, funnels, etc. So if there is any breakage for them, they all will be recorded in this register. So how it is breaked. So all these informations will be recorded in breakable stock register. It is used to have to keep record about glasswares like test tubes, flasks, etc. The next one is consumable stock register. So this register includes the information about chemicals or fluids that we consumed while carrying out an experiment like acids, alcohols, distilled water, magnesium wire, etc. So all the informations about these consumable materials will be recorded in consumable stock registers, and this is a specimen that we can see in a consumable stock register. So we said that different registers are recorded for different like consumable, non-consumable, they will be having different registers. So consumable material details will be recorded in consumable stock register. The next one is order register. So if you want to purchase a new apparatus or chemical, that details will be written in an order register. So this is the order register, the specimens that we can find in order register. If you have to buy any chemicals or any apparatus, you can record it in this register. The next one is the requirement register. So if you have any suggestions for or if you want any need of new resources for a science laboratory, you can include in this register. Or if there is any chemical which is to be purchased for immediate use, that kinds of informations can be written in the requirement registers. So these are the 5 mainly found registers in laboratory: permanent stock register, breakable stock register, consumable stock register, order register, and requirement register. So I hope you are clear about these different types of registers. Next, while talking about the significance of laboratory or about the materials found, you should be aware about the accidents and the first aids that should be provided in a laboratory. So in laboratory, accidents may happen, so you should have a proper first aid kit. So these are the medicines that should be available in a first aid kit in laboratory, that is acetic acid, bandages, carbolic acid, cotton dressing gauze, eyedropper, forceps, glycerin, milk of magnesia, plaster, plucker or scissors, sodium carbonate, tincture iodine, vaseline. So these are the medicines which should be available in a laboratory in their first aid, because accidents can happen in a laboratory while carrying out an experiment. So you should also display a chart depicting the possible accidents that can carry out in a laboratory or that can happen in a laboratory, and what are the remedies we can use to for this kind of accidents. Let's check what are the common accidents and the first aid or a remedy that can use for these accidents. The first one is wound. So if there is any breaking of a glass vase, there will be possible having a wound. So for that we are using a first aid by applying cotton dipped in a tincture iodine, by applying this wound with tincture iodine, cotton dipped in tincture iodine. The next one is burns from fires. For that we can cover that portion with linen dipped in Vaseline. So these are the first aids that can use in laboratory. If there is any burns happen from fires, can cover that portion with linen dipped in Vaseline. Next one is burns from acids. So you have to wash that area with plenty of water and can apply 1% of sodium bicarbonate solutions. The next one is burns from alkalis. So you can wash that area with, if there is any burn from acid or alkalis, the first thing you have to do is to wash that area completely with plenty of water. And if it is a burn from alkali, then you can add weak vinegar or lime juice. So next one is the burn from phosphorus. You can wash that area with water and then cover with a cotton dipped in silver nitrates. So these are the first aid that can be used if any kind of burns are is caused from fire, acid, alkalis or phosphorus. The next one is injury in eye. So it is very dangerous. If there is happening any injuries, you have to immediately dealt it with the doctor. If acid is happen to splash into your eyes, the first thing you have to wash your eye, or you have to place your eye open and closed under the water, and should be washed with 15% of sodium bicarbonate solution. So if electric shock, because in a laboratory we are using some kind of electrical appliances, so there will be a chance of having an electric shock. So if you face such kind of situation, the first thing you have to do is to switch off all the electric supply, and then you have to beat that person who got shocked with a wooden stick, and then you have to admit him to the hospital. So these are the common accidents that we can find in laboratory, and these are the first aids that can, or remedies you can use for these accidents. The next one is the safety rules. So there are general safety rules that you have to follow in the laboratory. So let's look what are the rules. The first one is you have to know the location of laboratory safety showers, wash stations or fire extinguishing. If there is any kind of fires and all, you should be aware about the safety showers, wash stations or fire extinguishers that are available near your laboratory. And safety equipments must be located in the hallway near the laboratory entrance. So it is the first rule. You have to place safety equipments near the entrance of the laboratory. Next one is you should be aware about the emergency exit routes. So if there is any kind of fires or accident, You should be the first one, you have to get out of the laboratory, so you should be aware about the emergency exit routes. Second one is you have to avoid the direct contact, eye contact, or skin. The chemical should not have a direct contact with the skin or eye contact. So you should have to take precautions in order to avoid to have a to avoid such kinds of contact. Then you have to minimize the all kind of chemical exposure. So there will be chemical exposures, but you have to minimize all these kinds of chemical exposures. Then second, then you have to assume that all the chemicals of unknown toxicity are toxic, are highly toxic. So there are certain chemicals whose toxicity is not known. So you should assume that it is of highly toxic and you have to handle with very care. And you have to post warning signs if there is any hazardous materials or equipments placed. You should post a warning sign showing that there's some kind of hazardous materials. So you should be careful about that. So next one is you should avoid. It is one of the most commonly found thing, that is you should avoid distracting or startling person who is working in a laboratory. You should not disturb a person who is carrying out an experiment, because all their concentration will be on the experiment, and if you are distracting them, they will get started and there will be a splashing of chemical or any other kind of accident. So should not distract or startle a person who is working in the laboratory. Next, you have to use the equipment only for that designated purpose. So an equipment will be having a proper purpose, so that equipment must be only used for that purpose. You should not be using for any other kind of purposes. So next, you have to combine the reagents in their appropriate order. While you are dealing with chemicals, their order will be there. A specific order will be there for their addition, for combining these reagents. So that proper order should be maintained. For example, the acid should be added towards water, not water to acid. So these are the general rules we have to find. Next is, you should not leave containers of chemicals open. So the students will be having a great tendency to use the chemical and just place that container open. So you should not leave that container of chemicals open. Then the all containers must be appropriate, should have an appropriate label. So names of the chemicals must be appropriately labeled in that bottle. If there is any kind of unlabeled chemicals, you should not use, because you are not fair. You are not you do not know whether that chemical is you are taking is right or not, because there is no label. So you should only use the labeled chemicals. Then you should not taste or intentionally sniff the chemical. So you should not sniff, because the vapors may be harmful for your body. So you should not taste or intentionally sniff the chemicals. Then you have to wash the exposed areas of the skin prior to leaving the laboratory, because we are handling with chemicals. So there will be some kind of chemicals in your hand. So before leaving the laboratory, you have to wash your hands thoroughly with water, because if you are after laboratory, if you are eating or drinking something, there will be chance to consume some chemicals. So you have to wash the exposed areas of the skins with water before leaving the laboratory. So long hairs and long clothings must be pulled back. So in order to avoid any kind of entanglement or any fire capture, so you have to pull up your long hairs and loose clothing while entering the laboratory. And you should not use any kind of contact lens while using any kind of hazardous chemicals. And also you should wear the safety glasses. Laboratory safety glasses or goggles must be worn while carrying out a reaction, because there may be a chance of splashing the chemicals towards the eye. So in order to avoid that, you can use laboratory glasses or goggles. And you can also use covered shoes in order to avoid the spilling of chemicals into your feet and all. You can use covered shoes. And also you should not wear synthetic fiber clothes, because if you are working with any flammable liquids or any fire, it will melt that material, and there is a chance to stick that material into your exposed skin. So you should not wear any kind of synthetic fibers while carrying out experiments in the laboratory. And also you can along with the safety rules, you can also use laboratory coats in order to avoid such kind of situation. And also after using this, laboratory coat should be carried out of the laboratory. It should not be placed in a break room or office, because there is a chance of spreading contaminants to other areas. So these are the general safety rules or safety rules that a person have to follow in a laboratory. And that's all about the topic. I hope everyone understood. Thank you.
Very good, Georgia. I think all of you understood about laboratory. Do you got? You have to note
Yes, ma'am.
these points when you are discussing about laboratory. Take out these points. That is, as a science teacher, you have to know how to construct a science laboratory. If when you are going to take charge in any school and a teacher, headmaster or administrator asks you to prepare a laboratory by yourself, you have to know how to construct a laboratory. So that's the important thing that you have to note while you are learning about science lab. So you have to note about the important equipments, already Georgia discussed, important chemicals, infrastructure, important documents, safety rules, first aid kit. So all these things have to be noted. Along with that, two other points are also, as you all know about that, laboratory, that is very indispensable part when you are discussing about science instruction. And it is an excellent tool for every science teacher for teaching. So, but what about our experience as a science student about laboratory? Is it a learning space for us or a resting space for us? Is it a murmuring space for us? എത്ര പേര് ലാബ് പീരീഡ് ഉണ്ട് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞപ്പോ പുതിയ കാര്യങ്ങൾ ചെയ്യാലോ, പുതിയ എക്സ്പെരിമെന്റ് ചെയ്യാലോ, പുതിയ കെമിക്കൽസ് പരിചയപ്പെടാലോ എന്നൊക്കെ വിചാരിച്ച എത്ര പേരുണ്ട്? ഉച്ച കഴിഞ്ഞ് ലാബാടോ എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ എത്ര പേരുണ്ട് സന്തോഷത്തോടെ? നമുക്കൊരു ഭയങ്കര ഒരു ഇൻഡ്യൂസിയാസം ആയിരുന്നു. എന്റെ അനുഭവം അങ്ങനെയായിരുന്നു. നിങ്ങളുടെ അനുഭവം എത്ര പേരുണ്ട്? പുതിയ എക്സ്പെരിമെന്റ്സ് പഠിക്കാനുള്ള ആഗ്രഹത്തിന്റെ പുറത്ത് ലാബിൽ പോയ എത്ര പേരുണ്ട്? ഞാൻ അങ്ങനെ പോയെന്ന് ഉറക്കെ പറയണ്ട, മെസ്സിൽ ടെക്സ്റ്റിൽ ഇട്ടാലും മതി. പഠിക്കണം, പുതിയ എക്സ്പെരിമെന്റ് പഠിക്കണം. ഉറക്കെ പറയാൻ കൂടെ ആരുമില്ലേ? അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ടെസ്റ്റിൽ ഇടാനും ആരുമില്ലേ? ആ, നിങ്ങളെല്ലാം പുതിയ എക്സ്പെരിമെന്റ് ചെയ്യാനായിട്ട് ആഗ്രഹിച്ചു പോയവരാണ്. ബാക്കിയുള്ളവരോ? എല്ലാരും എനിക്ക് വയ്യ, നിങ്ങളൊക്കെ ഭയങ്കര സംഭവമാണ് കേട്ടോ. എനിക്ക് കാണാൻ പറ്റുന്നില്ലല്ലോ എന്നുള്ളൊരു വിഷമമുണ്ട് നിങ്ങളുടെ ആരുടെയും മുഖം. ഓക്കെ, സോ ലബോറട്ടറി എപ്പോഴും ഒരു ലേണിംഗ് സ്പേസ് ആയിരിക്കണം. അപ്പൊ ഇതിനകത്ത് ഒന്ന് രണ്ട് കാര്യങ്ങൾ ആഡ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്, ഒന്ന് ഇൻഫ്രാസ്ട്രക്ചർ ആണ്. നിങ്ങളോട് ഒരു വ്യക്തി പിന്നെ ലാബ് കൺസ്ട്രക്ട് ചെയ്യാനായിട്ട് ആവശ്യപ്പെട്ടാൽ നിങ്ങൾ അതിൽ എന്തെല്ലാം കാര്യങ്ങളാണ് ഇൻക്ലൂഡ് ചെയ്യേണ്ടത്? നിങ്ങൾക്കറിയാം, ഓൾറെഡി ഇപ്പം ജോർജിയ പറഞ്ഞതിൽ തന്നെ വി ഗോട്ട് സം പോയിന്റ്സ് ലൈക്ക് in every lab there is a doing area or a workspace is there where teacher when somebody is thinking about a lab, two things must come to their mind. One is shelf with chemicals, some equipments, table with the teacher, and our working space, that is some demonstration tables and all that. That is our working space. This will come to our mind. I don't know about other universities. This is what in my mind, or those who completed their PG from Kerala University is having, I don't know about other universities, but when you are going to construct a lab, you must remember that this is the most limited infrastructure facilities you can provide to your student, most limited. When you are constructing a lab, you must have something additions like yes, there is a doing space, or you can say workspace for students. There must be an exhibition phase, or exhibition space in Davanam, where the usually teachers are doing along with the students, that the teacher will come and stand along with us, and teacher will demonstrate the experiment first time for us with the help of some of the selected students, and we are going to repeat that. That's the usual way of doing science. But this is not the correct way. There must be an exhibition space which is really visible to all the students who are there in the lab. So that must be there. There must be a digital museum. There must be dark room. There is a dark room in some space, in some lab. Then there must be a demonstration space. That is, in this demonstration space or the exhibition space, the teacher is really performing. The difference between exhibition space and demonstration space is in the exhibition space, if the students are standing in their own space in the lab, we know that places are allotted for each science student in a lab. This is your position, your belongings are to be stored here. And students are sitting in that particular place, and teacher is standing in another position which is really visible for all the students, and teacher is performing the experiment, and the student can follow up, or the student can do it parallelly. That is the exhibition space. But in demonstration space, the students are just observing what the teacher is doing. So it may be a very small space. So such a space must be there. And another space is that what we have now. And another type is the project space. This project space is really opened all the time for the students, that still you are completing your project in the PG or in the UG. You are really free to work whenever you have time. But it is not possible because our lab is not opened always in our universities. But usually that's another way in which we can use lab. Another one is every lab must possess a library. How many labs have library? Then along with that, there must be a creative space. Creative space means you already learned about improvised states the last sem. So this creative space provides some science kits or something like that. And the students are really free. This is about the school students, not about UG or PG. This is for school students. They are providing science kits there. And the students are really free to do the experiments by themselves. That surely develop their skills. So that space is called creative space. Government is having some hubs like that, just as a part of planetarium. There is an innovative hub. How many of you visited innovative hub in planetarium? Do any of you are exposed to that part? You may have seen the astro part of planetarium. How many of you visited the innovative hub? Have to give an answer. Okay. So, okay. So, anybody visited? Anybody have any information about? No one know about it. So there is an innovative hub which really gives importance to all, even the coding, coding Python, Scratch, all this coding also. So they are as part of that. That is the robotics, you know that. So in this innovative hub, they have the exposure to robotics also, not only science, physics, or chemistry in planetarium. So when you are going to become a teacher and you are getting a chance to construct a lab in your school, keep in mind all these things. And the another one which I want to give a information is about the first aid kit that is already discussed by Georgia. The thing is, if somebody when starting an lab, it's an important urgent requirement is that you must have a first aid kit, and we will buy one, but we do not know how to use it. That's the other thing. So you must know how to use the first aid kit, because you are the charge of the laboratory in your school. So it's your responsibility. So take care as a science teacher that it's the responsibility of every science teacher that the students must be well aware about the science laboratory. And only if you are making the laboratory as part of your science teaching, you will remain in the mind of the teachers, remain in the mind of the students as a teacher. Otherwise, you will become just the same as any of other arts or language teachers. And science is not a subject that can be taught in that way. So only if you are using science lab. In my experience is also like that. When there was one teacher for my son who was always teaching in science lab, his physics classes, he likes him very much because sir was really teaching him something. Before that and after that also he is having a science teachers. But only when that sir took him to the whole class to the science lab and taught them physics using science lab, then only they understand that how much significant is the subject, how much interesting is the subject. So as a science teacher is our real responsibility. So I think Grishma, is 20 minutes enough for you?
Yes, teacher.
Okay, so now we are coming to the next topic by Grishma, and it's again another very interesting topic, that is field trip. Okay, Grishma, please take over.
Audible, Anu?
Yes.
Good morning, teacher and my dear friends. Today I have to present the topic about the values of field trips. Before going to discuss about the values of field trips, we have to know that we have to know about what is field trip. It is defined as an educational procedure by which the students obtain first-hand information by observing places, objects, phenomena, activities, and processes in their natural setting to further learning. First-hand information, which means direct experience. So we get the direct experience of places, objects, activities, phenomena through field trips, in which we can experience them by our multisensory organs like see, hear, touch, etc. So we can say that it is a natural way to further learning beyond the walls of classroom. So next we are going to discuss about the values of field trips. First point is it provides an opportunity in learning attitudes and positive values like cooperation, discipline, etc. We can develop the moral values, related attitude or behavior through field trips like sharing, cooperating, discipline, etc. And the next point is they correlate and blend school life with the outside world, providing direct touch with person and with community situations. It can show the combined effect of school life and real life, which means it's an uh, application level of experience. Next point, it provides opportunity in learning and acquiring skills in observation, communication, critical thinking, and social skills. It is very important to have a good communication skill to withstand in our society. So it provides the skills about the observation, communication, etc. Next point is students develop a better understanding of the etiological factors of the disease. Etiological factors means causes of disease. That is, sometimes students face a lot of health related issues, illness whenever we are going to outside. So we etiological factors of the diseases. Next slide. Next point is supplements and enriches the classroom teaching. It enhances the classroom teaching and it provides an additional or experiences. And next point is it stimulates interest in nature and learning. It is like motivation to our interest, because interest is the basic thing for our for anything to do anything to do. So it stimulates interest in nature and learning. um, it interacts with nature. And next point is correlates the classroom life with the outside world. As we already discussed about the point. Next point, it provides opportunity to consider individual and group participants in the natural social conditions. As we know, we are humans, so we are different. We are all different in different characters. So we have to balance the behavior or nature when we are in a group. So it provides an opportunity to solve these problems when we are in a group. Georgia, next slide. Okay, next, to help the bridge the gap between education and hands-on experience. Within a classroom, but we have to learn how is the outside world or beyond the sky. What happens the beyond the sky? So it helps the bridge gap between education and hands-on experience. So because we get the direct experience through the field trips. Next, children can learn more about the world and how to interact with others when we leave the sheltered environment of the classroom. It provides a lot of experience for the students with different circumstances. And next, it provides relaxed to mind and entertainment for students. As we know, field trips are very friendly and very uh, relaxful experience. So it provides relax to our mind. Next slide. It arouse interest and vitalize instructions, thereby providing motivation. Through this direct experience, we get the motivation for the innovative things to do and see. Next point is create spirit of scientific inquiry. It is very important point to for a science student, because we we get a enthusiasm, or we get a scientific curiosity to observe such different phenomena. And next point is it develops better social awareness. It is also a very important point. Then next point, it will promote the development in knowledge and emotion skills. These skills are very important for students. So it provides an opportunity to develop and can enhance their skills. Uh, okay, thank you.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, I think all of you went for breakfast, right? Okay. Now, Grishma discussed about the field trips and its significance. Well, you have to learn. Good, Grishma. Appreciating you for that. You have to know how to conduct a field trip. That's very important. Just I'm giving some instructions for that. When you are thinking about a field trip never be an pleasure trip. There is some differences between field trip and pleasure trip, right? So that's why it's always called field trip. We are not calling field trip a picnic. Okay, picnic and field trip. The difference is field trip is really must be curriculum oriented, experience focused. That's very important. Otherwise, there is no meaning in conducting a one-day program to go somewhere. So it must be curriculum oriented and experience focused, and we must take care about time, effort, and money. We are not free to spend as much time, as much effort, or as much money for a field trip. It must be limited. These are some things to be kept in mind when we are planning a field trip. And every field trip must enhance the curriculum. In one way or other, it must correlating to the curriculum, must give some new experiences which we cannot get in another way, and must give some team building. So these are some other things to be care. And major, when we are saying about a field trip, there must be 5 steps like planning, preparing, execution, follow-up, evaluation. These are the 5 steps to be followed when we are thinking about a field trip. Planning, preparation, execution, follow-up, and evaluation. You can understand all these things because you know how to, you already gone as a student, you went for so much of many field trips maybe, but as a teacher, you have to conduct a field trip. That's most important. That is, planning means many things. That is, first is why we are going. We have to think about it. Based on that, only you can select one place. When to go, how to go. All these are linked with this particular phase, planning. That is economy of, you may have some 50 students in your class of different economic background. If we are not providing the free trip, we have to take care about all the economic stability. So we have to select such a place that is really affordable for all the students in our class. So that's really very difficult, but we have to. That is planning. And so selecting a location, selecting a mode of transport, selecting the food, all these are, all these are really involved in this. But the great limitation is finance. And we have to take care about this finance, and we have to plan. Next stage is about preparation. In preparation phase, you have to talk to the principal and how to get the permission. some teachers already visit the site before they take the students, and then only they finalize the location. Because we are going with 50 students. Maybe you may have some support from other teachers or from some assistants, but that never means that you are the responsible person. So some teachers will do the prior visit to the place. So that's really more safe. So that confirms our safety, or confirms that our arrangements are more good, systematic. And then we had to select one time. After that, we have to confirm the safety measures we are taking, like even the medical things also, because 50 students, they may have some medical requirements also. We have to consider that also. Then what you have to do is you have to send a letter to the parent asking permission why we are conducting the trip, the destination, what all we are going to do there. When we are returning back, do they have to send some food items, or what all things they have to take? So this is a letter or the instruction the teacher is sending through the principal, with a sign from the principal to the parents. Then the teacher have to keep each and every record in a file, because if anything happens, the teacher must have a record that they have done everything systematically. They must keep the signed permission letters. They have to get the permission from the principal, that letter, all the medical things you have done, along with that, emergency numbers of the students, if any need, money, all this you have to take care. And you must have a file of all these things, and take care of all that before you go on to the field trip. And you must have some alternate arrangements also. If you are going to a very long place, a very very long sport, make some alternate arrangements for staying, if you're staying there. And it's always better if you are arranging field trip with the small students, especially the students below 7th standard. It's better if you are taking parent volunteers with you. Like any of your parents who are willing to come with us, they are free to come. That make your role more safe. So parent volunteers, especially ladies, gents also in some cases. You can take their help also, or you can take some student teachers. If some BEd trainees are there with you, you can take them also with you. So another one is keep the attendance of the student who are coming and time, all that. And the most important thing is you have to make the students understand that why they are going. How much important is the discipline throughout the journey. Then only their behavior throughout the journey. Then only we can manage such a long students group by ourselves in a journey. So all this we have to take care when we are planning a field trip. So I'm not giving tension to you thinking about this. I'm doing a great job. Teachers' job are always like that. A great responsibility we have, and we are ready to do that also. The students are always very happy that we are providing such facilities to the students